Everyone who set foot in Evelyn Hale's mansion left before the month was over. Some whispered the house was cursed. Others swore its walls were alive, listening, waiting. But when Noah Bennett, single father, ex-firefighter with scars he never explained, took the job no one else would keep, he discovered the mansion's greatest secret wasn't in its walls at all. It was in the eyes of its lonely owner, a billionaire hiding more than just her fortune, and in a letter buried beneath the stairs that could shatter both of their lives. The advertisement looked almost suspicious in its simplicity. Housekeeper needed, mansion on Hollow Creek, complete confidentiality required, compensation generous, experience with smart home systems a plus. The words seemed ordinary, but there was a current beneath them, a weight that kept others away. Dozens of people had tried before, or so the whispers went, but no one lasted more than a handful of weeks. Something about that house always sent them fleeing. Noah Bennett read it twice before folding the clipping back into his jacket. 36 years old, his dark hair already flecked with the silver of exhaustion, Noah was a man who had stopped being afraid of difficult jobs long ago. Life had already handed him its worst test 8 years earlier, when his wife died, leaving him to raise their son alone. Since then, he had taken whatever work came along: janitor, night security, warehouse shifts that broke his back but paid the rent. His hands still bore the pale scars of his years as a firefighter, proof that he had once carried people out of smoke and fire, proof that he understood how to hold on when the air itself tried to kill you. Hollow Creek was quiet when he arrived for the interview. The road wound past maple trees that leaned together like conspirators, their leaves whispering above the still water. At the end of the lane stood the mansion, high stone walls, iron gates, and silence so dense that even the sound of his boots on gravel seemed like an intrusion. He hesitated, wondering if this place would be another door that opened only to close on him again. She met him in the grand foyer, where the ceiling soared so high it felt like the sky had been stolen and set indoors. Evelyn Hale. The name carried weight in the logistics world, though Noah only half remembered reading it in the papers. She was 33, and everything about her seemed pressed and perfect, as if she had been ironed into her life. A white suit hugged her frame like armor, her blonde hair tied back with the precision of someone who could not allow even one strand to escape. Her eyes, brown but edged with steel, were the only part of her that betrayed something softer, though whatever lived there was buried deep. "The rules are simple," she said, her voice low and clipped, like a woman used to boardrooms and deadlines. Silence after 9 in the evening, no personal phones or devices in the child's wing. And, she paused as if reconsidering whether to bother saying it, "just so you're aware, no one has managed to stay in this position for long." Noah nodded. He had learned not to flinch when people offered warnings. He took the set of keys she handed him. The metal was cool, heavy in his palm, like a small promise or a burden. It was then that a sound broke the mansion's stillness, the patter of quick feet on the staircase. A girl darted down, no more than 5, her hair a soft golden cascade so much like her mother's that the resemblance was startling. But her eyes were different, wide, searching, filled not with defenses, but with unguarded curiosity. She stopped halfway down the staircase, staring at him with the solemnity only children could carry. "Is he the one who's going to stay?" she asked. Her voice hung in the air, almost echoing against the marble. Evelyn froze, her back stiffening as though the child had revealed too much. Noah crouched slightly, offering the girl a smile. "I'll try," he said, simple words that seemed to satisfy her. The girl's face softened into something close to hope. Evelyn's expression, however, did not change. She said nothing, her silence stretching out like another set of rules he was expected to follow. But Noah, standing there with the key still cold in his hand, did not feel unwelcome. For reasons he couldn't name, her silence didn't push him away. It held him there, as if asking him to prove he could bear it. And so began his work in the house where no one stayed. The mansion loomed above him, polished and immaculate, yet whispering with secrets in its walls. Evelyn Hale, with her white armor and guarded eyes, carried herself like a woman at war, with something unseen. And the little girl, Lily, watched him as though she already knew more than she could say. Noah told himself it was just another job. He had scrubbed floors in offices, carried trash out of nightclubs, repaired toilets in schools that smelled of bleach, A house, no matter how vast, was still only a house. But as the front door closed behind him and the quiet settled in again, he felt an unsettling truth stir inside him. This was not just work. This place was going to change him. The mansion revealed itself slowly, like a puzzle that refused to be solved in one glance. During the first few days, Noah learned to move through its vast spaces with quiet efficiency, carrying a bucket, a rag, or a toolbox in hand. The house was spotless on the surface. Polished marble, gleaming windows, mirrors that reflected perfection back at whoever dared to look. But the longer he stayed, the more he felt something unsettled beneath that glossy skin, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Every corridor seemed too clean, too rehearsed. He would run a hand along the rail of the sweeping staircase and find not a speck of dust. Yet the wood was worn under his fingers, polished by hands that no longer touched it. Portraits on the walls, landscapes mostly, not people, hung in careful order, all in the same style, as though someone had bought the idea of a home rather than allowed it to grow naturally. But the silence was never complete. At night it cracked. Noah was a light sleeper, and each time the clock moved past 2 in the morning, he would find himself awake, staring at the ceiling in the small servants' room tucked behind the kitchen. The sound was subtle at first, a faint hum in the walls, a shifting of air vents, the buzz of wires that seemed to come alive when the world was at its stillest. Then came the footsteps, light, measured, as though someone walked the upper corridor with deliberate caution. The alarms flickered too, not enough to raise the household, but enough to register in the control panel logs Noah had learned to check out of old firefighter habit. At 2:13 a.m. one night, the system signaled a motion trigger outside Lily's room. Noah padded quietly up the hall barefoot, his heart trained to stay calm in emergencies. He opened the panel hidden behind a decorative screen and scrolled through the logs. False alarms, the system said. But he didn't believe in ghosts in machines. False alarms meant something or someone was pushing where they shouldn't. During the day, Lily filled the silence. She had the curiosity of a child who hadn't yet been taught what not to ask. She trailed him sometimes, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear nearly torn off. She built cities from wooden blocks in the playroom, tiny skylines that she explained in whispers, as if they were secrets meant only for her and Noah. "Uncle Noah," she said one evening, as he fixed the batteries in a toy keyboard, "sometimes an echo lives here. It hides in the walls." He glanced at her, half expecting mischief in her face, but she was perfectly serious. Her eyes were wide, reflective like her mother's, but without the armor. "Echoes aren't dangerous," he said gently, turning the tiny screw back into place. "As long as you know where they come from." She tilted her head, not entirely convinced. "But this one, it doesn't like being alone." Evelyn, on the other hand, moved through the mansion like a ghost, who insisted on pretending she was made of flesh and bone. She returned late, always in that immaculate white suit, carrying the scent of boardrooms and city streets with her. She spoke sparingly, offering clipped thanks when Noah presented her with household reports or fixed small problems she hadn't noticed. Yet sometimes when she leaned down to kiss Lily goodnight, Noah caught a glimpse of something entirely different. Her shoulders softened, her face eased, and for a moment she was just a mother, not a commander holding an empire together. Still, her distance remained. She ate quickly, alone in the dining room, reviewing documents even as she lifted her fork. She disappeared into her office with its glass wall overlooking the gardens, emerging only when duty demanded it. Noah, though, had learned to read the unspoken. The house didn't simply need a caretaker, it needed someone to watch its pulse. And so, while he dusted chandeliers or polished silver that never seemed to tarnish, he also paid attention to the patterns. The cleaning robot, for instance, should have started from the kitchen wing. Instead, its path began outside the child's room at irregular hours. The air filtration system pumped out a sharp, adult fragrance at night, almost chemical, a scent that did not belong anywhere near a child. And always at that same hour after midnight, the sensors flickered. One evening, Noah lifted the cover of the main distribution panel, tucked away near the garage. Inside was a tangle of neat factory wiring, except for one detail. Fine additional wires had been soldered in, sloppily, clearly not part of the original design. They were tucked back as if meant to stay unseen, but his trained eye caught them immediately. Someone had spliced into the system. Someone else was listening. He closed the panel quietly, heart steady but mind racing. The house was beautiful, yes. Immaculate, yes. But beauty sometimes hides the rot underneath. And Noah was beginning to suspect that the vacancy nobody could fill wasn't cursed by the house at all. It was cursed by something or someone who wanted it that way. Some stains could never be scrubbed away, no matter how clean the surface looked. Noah had worked enough jobs to recognize the difference between dust and something deeper, something that lingered in the air, in the tone of voices carried through the halls, in the way people avoided looking too closely at certain corners of their own lives. This house, for all its polished marble and sparkling chandeliers, had those stains. They lived in Evelyn Hale's eyes whenever she returned from her office, her phone still pressed against her ear, her voice sharp, tired, defensive. He overheard fragments because the mansion carried sound in strange ways. The stone walls and glass corridors made private conversations leak into the silence, bouncing until they reached unwilling ears. One evening, while Noah polished the silver service in the dining room, he heard Evelyn's voice from the kitchen doorway. It was clipped, low, but edged with steel. "No, Victoria, I won't accelerate the merger," she said. "If we do that, the supply chain collapses. We won't meet even half the delivery commitments." The pause was short. Then Evelyn again, quieter now. "Flexible? You mean replaceable?" "Yes, I understand exactly what you're saying." Noah pretended to be absorbed in the silver tray he was wiping, but the name stuck with him. Victoria Reed, Chief Financial Officer. Even without knowing her, Noah recognized the kind of pressure Evelyn was under. He had seen it before, in firehouses and hospitals, when someone at the top wanted to save their reputation at any cost. And it was always the ones who refused to bend who paid the price. Later that night, he found Evelyn alone in the kitchen. The lights were dim, just one lamp over the island counter. She sat with her blazer draped over the back of a chair, sleeves of her white blouse rolled halfway up. A glass of water stood before her, untouched. Her posture was rigid, her face pale, though she tried to keep her composure even in solitude. "We're holding the company together with string and nails," she murmured into the stillness, almost as if speaking to herself. "And they want me gone, because I won't gamble it away." Noah cleared his throat softly before setting a glass of fresh water down near her hand. She looked up sharply, clearly startled, as though she had forgotten anyone else was awake. "You don't have to," she began, the words automatic, defensive. But before Noah could answer, another voice interrupted, small and steady. Lily had padded into the kitchen in her nightgown, clutching her rabbit. She walked right to her mother, her little brows drawn together with the seriousness of someone far older than 5. "Mom," she said softly, touching Evelyn's arm, "your eyes are like the sky before it rains again." The words seemed to slice through Evelyn more deeply than anything Noah might have offered. She pulled her daughter onto her lap, holding her tightly, while her lips trembled with a smile that was both fragile and grateful. Noah watched, realizing that Lily was the only one capable of piercing Evelyn's armor without shattering her. After that evening, Noah made it his quiet mission to arrive earlier than scheduled. He tended to the things nobody asked him to. The tiny lock on Lily's music box, the furnace filter clogged before its time, the flickering light in the service corridor. He also kept checking the system logs when no one was watching. The pattern was clear now. Commands triggered to the ventilation system at the same time each night, well after the house had gone to sleep. The faint, acrid scent in the child's wing was no accident. Someone was programming the air to run differently than it should. He remembered the smell from years ago, the smell that clung to his firefighter's gear after a long blaze. Wiring left to smolder, insulation heated too long. Here it was faint, manufactured, but unmistakable. Whoever was tampering with the house wasn't only listening, they were testing boundaries. One late afternoon, as Evelyn passed through the hall, she paused when she saw Noah crouched beside a vent, the filter in his hands. "You don't have to do that," she said again, her voice tired but still clipped. "Yes, I do," he answered, meeting her gaze calmly. "The house is part of the job." Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but instead she simply nodded. For a heartbeat, her brown eyes softened, and in them Noah saw something he hadn't before. Not just fatigue or guarded strength, but gratitude. Genuine, human gratitude. It was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, but it was enough to confirm what he already suspected. The house was too perfect to be untouched by danger. The vacancy everyone fled from wasn't born from dust or inconvenience. It came from something deeper, something deliberately wrong, threaded into the life of the house like those sloppy wires he had found. And Evelyn, for all her wealth and power, was standing in the middle of it, alone, unbending, and perhaps closer to breaking than she dared admit. Noah knew then that his work here would never be just cleaning. It would be about keeping the walls upright, the air safe, the echoes in check. Whether Evelyn wanted him there or not, he wasn't going to be chased out like the others. Not by dust, not by shadows, not by whatever stain had been left in this place. The house chose its moments to speak, and Noah had learned to listen. He was not a man given to superstition, but there was something about the timing that gnawed at him. Always the same hour. Always the same minute. 2:13 in the morning. By then, the world outside was silent. Even the crickets seemed to pause, and the mansion itself, so vast and still, should have been asleep. But that was when it came alive. On the fourth night of watching, he sat on the staircase, leaning into the shadows so that from the hallway above he could not easily be seen. He had a clear line of sight to the panel, to the vents, to the upper landing where the sensors usually blinked red at that cursed minute. He waited steady as stone, his body trained by years of holding still in smoke, in heat, in places where every breath counted. The intercom crackled. A voice, female, whispering, low, slid out of the speakers. "Look outside." Noah froze, not in fear but in concentration. The voice was neither Evelyn's nor anyone he recognized. It was too deliberate to be static, too purposeful to be a glitch. He moved quickly but silently, rising from the steps and crossing to the nearest window. And there, hovering like a metallic insect against the black sky, was a drone. The reflection of its tiny camera glinted in the moonlight. It tilted, as though searching, its red eye scanning. Whoever controlled it wasn't just playing with technology, they were watching. Without hesitation, Noah ran outside through the service door, his feet finding the path as if he'd memorized it. The pool lay still under the moon, and leaning against the fence was a long-handled net used for skimming leaves from the water. He grabbed it, calculated the drone's drift, and swung. The net caught with a sharp jolt, the drone struggling against the mesh, before he yanked it to the ground. He pressed his hand to its casing until the rotors coughed and died. When he pried the small memory card from its side, his suspicion hardened into certainty. The house was not haunted by ghosts. It was under surveillance. The next morning, he placed the drone on Evelyn's desk. The office was immaculate, like the rest of the mansion, its glass wall spilling sunlight onto stacks of orderly documents. Evelyn looked up, her white suit immaculate as always, though her eyes were ringed with sleeplessness. "This was outside your window last night," Noah said, setting the object down carefully. Her hand tightened on the armrest of her chair, but her face remained calm. "That's a breach," she said evenly. "We're contracted with Doyle Security. This shouldn't happen." Within 20 minutes, Marcus Doyle himself arrived. A tall man with a frame like a locked vault, Marcus carried himself with the authority of someone used to being trusted without question. He picked up the drone, turned it over once, and gave a dismissive snort. "Kids," he said. "They play with these things, probably from the neighborhood." Noah stood a step behind Evelyn, his voice measured but sharp. "Kids don't splice wires into smart home systems. Kids don't piggyback commands into ventilation and lighting. This wasn't a prank." For a long moment, Evelyn's gaze moved between the two men. Marcus stood confident, his jaw tight with the weight of his reputation. Noah stood steady, his scars, his tired eyes, his quiet certainty carrying more truth than any uniform could. The silence was tense, stretched like wire over a canyon. And then Evelyn chose. "Check everything," she said to Marcus, her tone firm, final. "And I want a compliance specialist here by evening. Victoria can arrange it." Marcus's eyes flickered with irritation, but he nodded and left with the drone tucked under his arm. That night, the filters in the ventilation system were replaced, the control panels updated, the alarms reset. For the first time, the house seemed to breathe easier. The silence after midnight felt almost like rest instead of dread. Lily slept without waking, curled against her stuffed rabbit, and Evelyn allowed herself a rare moment of relaxation, leaning back in her chair with the faintest ghost of relief crossing her face. But Noah, in his room behind the kitchen, stared at the printout logs spread across his desk. He traced the timestamps with his finger. Always 213. Always the same intrusions. Whoever had been tampering with the system had left fingerprints in the code. Digital ones, delicate but undeniable. They hadn't simply vanished because Marcus changed a filter. He leaned back, hands behind his head, his gaze drifting toward the ceiling as if he could see through it to the girl sleeping above. He wasn't afraid. Fear was for men who hadn't walked through burning buildings, but he understood what it meant. The person behind this wasn't finished. And when they returned, the house would speak again. The discovery came by accident, as the most important things often did. Noah had been repairing a step on the old service staircase, the one few people used anymore. It had groaned under his weight the night before, and he decided to take care of it before Lily's small feet found it. He knelt with his tools, prying back the loose wood panel to adjust the support beneath. What he didn't expect was the hollow sound that answered his hammer, an echo not of solid wood, but of something hidden. Curiosity had kept him alive more than once in his firefighter days. He tapped again, then slid his fingers into the narrow gap. The wood gave way, revealing a shallow cavity beneath the step. Inside was a small dented tin box covered in dust so fine it must have rested there for years. Noah lifted it out, the weight almost nothing, but his chest grew heavier as he opened the lid. The contents were simple, but they stole the air from his lungs. A faded Polaroid photograph lay inside, edges curled with age. Two teenage girls leaned into each other, arms wrapped tight, their smiles reckless and unguarded. One of them had light hair and eyes so familiar Noah's pulse stumbled, the same warm brown as Evelyn's. The other girl was unmistakable to him. Grace, his Grace, the wife he had lost 8 years ago, the woman he had thought the world had buried with all her secrets. For a long moment, Noah couldn't move. His hands trembled around the fragile photo. Memories flooded him. Grace laughing at nothing. Grace holding Aiden when he was just an infant. Grace whispering stories about her childhood in the foster system. She had spoken sometimes about a girl she called her sister, not by blood but by bond. A girl named Evie. Clever, ambitious, always dreaming of something bigger. Grace said she hadn't heard from her in years, that Evie had run off into her own future, swallowed by the city and its promises. Noah's breath came shallow. Evelyn Hale. Evie. He lowered his gaze back to the box. At the bottom lay a single envelope, yellowed with time. Written across it, in Grace's uneven hand, were the words, Evie, open when the house becomes too loud. Noah's throat closed. He sank onto the step, the unfinished repair forgotten. His scarred fingers tore carefully at the envelope, unfolding the paper within. The letter was short, but every word rang like a bell in his bones. Evie, if you are reading this, it means the house is too loud, loud enough to rattle your teeth. Loud with people who want to use you, with walls that don't keep secrets. Listen, one day you will meet someone who doesn't run from dirty work. He won't be a prince. He'll be a man who knows how to save air when it's burning. Please don't hide from him. Trust him. And if you are scared, remember our secret. Happiness is never quiet. It is loud, Evie. Loud like the laughter we shared when the foster mothers threw us out of the kitchen for making more noise than the pots and pans. Don't forget. The paper blurred as Noah's vision stung. He pressed the letter against his knee, gripping it as though it might vanish like smoke. Grace had written this long before he had stepped foot in Hollow Creek, long before her life had ended in the accident that had left him alone with Aiden. She had written it with faith in a future she would never see. A future that somehow had led him here, into her sister's house, into this strange tangle of silence and echoes. For the first time since her death, Noah felt shock, not as pain, but as revelation. The threads of his life, scattered and frayed, were weaving themselves into something he hadn't dared imagine. Grace was gone, yet here she was. Her words crossing time, guiding him, binding him to Evelyn in ways neither of them had chosen. He sat for a long time on that stair, the tin box resting in his lap, the photograph smiling up at him with a warmth that cut through the chill of the house. He knew then that this was no coincidence. The mansion had swallowed too many people, but it had kept this one secret safe, waiting for the moment when it would matter most. When at last Noah closed the box, He did so with careful reverence. The unfinished step could wait. He had something far more fragile to protect now, a truth Evelyn did not yet know, and a choice about whether to keep it hidden or place it into her guarded hands. The echo in the walls no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like Grace herself, reminding him that the past was not finished with him, not yet. The night of the charity gala arrived dressed in brilliance. From the moment the first cars rolled up the long driveway of the Hale estate, the mansion became a stage. Crystal chandeliers glowed in every room, violins whispered from the corner of the grand hall, and guests in gowns and tuxedos drifted through the corridors like living ornaments. The air smelled of champagne and lilies, though beneath it Noah could still detect the faint, metallic trace of the house's wiring, humming and restless, as if it knew what was coming. Evelyn stood at the center of it all, her white suit more striking than the sequined dresses around her. She looked untouchable, a queen commanding her court, though Noah had seen the exhaustion hidden beneath her posture. Lily, her small hand tucked into her mother's, wore a pale blue dress that turned her into something like a storybook child, all innocence and light. She twirled for the mirrors in the foyer, her laughter rippling against the high ceiling. Noah stayed in the background, watching, not part of the party but not absent either. He was there the way a shadow is, silent, necessary, unnoticed until something blocks the light. The evening unfolded with practiced ease. Speeches about generosity, toasts to partnerships, applause rising and falling like waves. Yet Noah's attention never strayed far from the quiet hum of the house. He checked the exits, memorized the locations of extinguishers, noted the rhythm of the air vents. Years as a firefighter had left him with instincts he couldn't silence. Instincts that told him when something was wrong long before anyone else smelled smoke. At precisely 9:17 p.m., those instincts screamed. A soft pop from the lighting rig above was followed by the faintest crackle. The string of LEDs along the upper balcony flickered, and for a second the room glittered unnaturally bright, like teeth bared in a grin. Noah's nose caught it immediately, a trace of overheated insulation, acrid, dangerous, disguised beneath the perfume of flowers and alcohol. He moved before the guests even looked up. "Shut off the main power," he snapped at Marcus Doyle, who was stationed near the control panel. But Marcus hesitated, fumbling with his tablet, muttering something about diagnostics. By then the situation had shifted from strange to deadly. Smoke began curling from the vents above, not drifting naturally but forced, as if pushed deliberately into the spaces where guests clustered in gowns and tuxedos. The air thickened, panic starting to simmer as people noticed the haze. Whoever had tampered with the system hadn't just been listening, they had been preparing for this. Noah's training took over. He lunged for the fire cabinet on the wall, breaking the seal and yanking the extinguisher free. "Everyone to the exits!" His voice boomed above the orchestra's sudden silence. The musicians froze mid-note, and then the crowd began to move, women clutching pearls, men guiding them toward the wide doors. It was then that Evelyn's voice pierced the chaos. Sharp, raw, nothing like the CEO's boardroom tone. "Lily!" Noah spun, the child's wing. In an instant he understood. Lily wasn't with her mother. She had slipped away to play as she often did, wandering back to her safe space. He ran faster than he had in years, cutting through the smoke toward the narrow hallway that led to the children's rooms. His lungs drew in the sharp chemical taint, his skin prickling with the memory of flames he had once fought. At the end of the hall, he found the door sealed. The panic room, meant to protect the child, had activated automatically, locking Lily inside. The smart system had betrayed them, trapping her instead of saving her. Noah dropped to one knee at the intercom beside the door. "Lily, it's me. I'm right here." A small voice came through, muffled but steady. "Uncle Noah." The echo was scared. He swallowed hard, forcing calm into his tone. "Then we'll make it stop. Hold tight." The lock was electronic, designed to resist tampering, but Noah knew systems. He had dismantled doors in burning buildings with less than a crowbar in his bare hands. His fingers found the service latch, hot from the strain of overuse. He hissed as the metal seared his skin, but he forced it anyway, twisting, pulling, until with a metallic shriek the mechanism gave way. The door swung open, and Lily burst out, her little arms clinging to his neck, her body trembling like a leaf. He carried her against his chest, shielding her from the smoke, and ran back through the hallway. When they returned to the main hall, the chaos was subsiding. The fire had been contained, small, a staged disaster, designed more to frighten than to destroy. Guests crowded the lawn outside, coughing, murmuring, their gowns and suits dusted with smoke. Evelyn stood in the middle of the room, no longer immaculate. Her white suit bore gray smudges where ash had kissed her shoulders, her hair loosened, her face stripped of its practiced calm. But her eyes were blazing, clear, alive. Noah set Lily into her mother's arms. Evelyn clutched the girl tightly as if she would never let go. Their faces pressed together, one streaked with soot, the other damp with tears. Noah stood beside them, breathing hard, the extinguisher still warm in his grip. And in that moment, the house felt different. No longer just walls filled with secrets and echoes, but something else, something worth defending, something that might finally, painfully, begin to feel like home. The morning after the fire, the mansion felt hungover. The air carried the faint ghost of smoke, even though every window had been opened to purge it. Sunlight cut across the marble floors in sharp, accusing beams, showing the smudges left behind from shoes that had fled in panic the night before. Evelyn sat in her office with a cup of coffee cooling beside her, her hair pulled back, but not as carefully as usual. The polish of her armor cracked by exhaustion. Noah stood across from her desk, spreading out printouts he had taken from the system logs. His hands, though bandaged from where the hot metal had burned them, moved with precision. He tapped one line, then another, his voice quiet but unyielding. "These aren't malfunctions," he said. "These are commands. Someone was feeding instructions into your system, into your vents, your lights, your alarms. They weren't random, and they weren't an accident." Evelyn scanned the pages, her jaw tightening. The timestamps were undeniable. The exact minute the lights had sparked, the exact moment the vents had pushed smoke through the ballroom, and every line pointed to one thing. The signature of the account glared back at her. VRID. "Victoria Reed," she whispered, as though the name itself might ignite something. Marcus Doyle, summoned again after his spectacular failure the night before, stood stiff near the window. His face had lost its usual smug confidence. "Are you saying your CFO is responsible for a fire hazard in your own home?" "I'm saying the evidence is clear," Noah replied, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Whoever did this had access not just to the house, but to the company's systems. That's not kids with drones. That's inside access. And if last night had gone differently, if the alarms hadn't been contained, this could have ended with more than a scare." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. The white of her blouse caught the light, but her expression had nothing of its usual cold control. Instead, her face was carved with fury, quiet, restrained, but lethal. "They want me gone," she said finally. "The board thinks I'm inflexible." That's their word, inflexible. Victoria's been whispering for months about how the company needs someone who will play along with faster mergers, riskier deals. She doesn't care if the supply chain collapses. She just cares about the profit on the next quarter's report. "And so she tried to light a fire under you," Noah said, grim. The bitter twist of a smile touched Evelyn's mouth. "Or burn me out of my own position." Later that day, the board of directors convened in a special session. Evelyn walked into the conference room, still marked by the night before. Her suit was pressed, yes, but her skin still carried the faint shadow of soot that even makeup couldn't quite erase. Her presence was sharper for it. She didn't look like a queen in polished armor anymore. She looked like a survivor of war, and that made her dangerous. Victoria sat 2 chairs down, her smile brittle, her pearls gleaming. "A small incident," she began smoothly. "Likely a systems malfunction. I've already spoken with—" Evelyn cut her off, dropping the folder of logs onto the polished oak table with a heavy smack. Pages spilled, the printed commands glaring up like accusations. "Not a malfunction," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "A deliberate intrusion. The logs trace directly back to your account, Victoria. You nearly suffocated my daughter in her own home. Do you want to tell the board that was just a test run?" The silence that followed was suffocating in its own way. Some directors shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, eyes narrowing at Victoria. The woman's smile faltered, her painted lips trembling just slightly. I was only running diagnostics," she stammered, "stress testing the system." "By pumping smoke into a ballroom full of people?" Evelyn's tone sliced through her words like a blade. By trapping a child in a panic room, you didn't just threaten my family. You threatened the stability of this company by showing you're willing to gamble with lives to get your way. There was no vote that day. Victoria was escorted out, her protests echoing down the marble halls of the corporate offices. Marcus Doyle resigned quietly soon after, handing over his cap and muttering thanks to Noah, who had saved him from a far greater disgrace by catching the truth before it turned fatal. When the dust settled, Evelyn returned to the mansion. She walked into her office where Noah waited. He had been holding on to something all day, something heavier than system logs and accusations. On her desk, he set down the dented tin box, the faded photograph, and the letter he had found. Evelyn froze. Her hands hovered above the items as if they were sacred, afraid to touch. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Behind the old staircase," Noah said. His voice was steady, but his heart beat like a hammer. "It belonged to Grace." Her name hung in the air. Evelyn's composure cracked. Her lips parted, her eyes widened, and for the first time since Noah had met her, she looked unguarded, almost fragile. You knew her?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling with something between hope and grief. Noah nodded. He unfolded the letter and read aloud. Grace's words filling the office with warmth that even the cold glass walls couldn't contain. As he spoke of echoes, of laughter loud enough to shake pots and pans, of happiness that should never be quiet, Evelyn closed her eyes. Tears streaked down her cheeks, cutting through the last remnants of her iron facade. When she opened them again, she looked at Noah not as an employee, not as a stranger, but as a man bound to her by something stronger than chance. "I searched for her everywhere," she whispered. "In foster records, in old towns, in newspapers. I thought she was gone forever. And somehow, she brought you here." Noah said nothing, only nodded, because words felt too small for what passed between them in that moment. Grace's presence lingered in the room, her memory binding their grief into something larger, something that felt startlingly like hope. For the first time since he had set foot in Hollow Creek, Noah saw Evelyn without her armor. And for the first time since Grace's death, he felt the past reaching not to wound him, but to guide him forward. The mansion no longer hummed with unrest at night. For weeks, Noah had trained himself to wake at 2:13, listening for the echoes in the walls, for the false alarms that had haunted him from the first night. But now, when the clock's red numbers slipped into that cursed minute, nothing stirred. The vents whispered softly with the steady rhythm of clean air. The alarms remained silent, and above him, in the child's wing, Lily slept soundly with her stuffed rabbit clutched tight against her chest. For the first time since he had stepped into Hollow Creek, the silence was honest. Aiden had begun visiting on weekends, and his presence filled the house with a new kind of noise, the noise of childhood colliding with childhood. He and Lily became instant conspirators, building forts out of couch cushions, castles out of wooden planks from the shed, whole cities from scraps of cardboard and imagination. Their voices carried down the halls in laughter, in playful arguments, in the kind of uninhibited shouting only children can make. The mansion, once echoing only with cold footsteps and whispered dread, now pulsed with the rhythm of family. Evelyn changed too. She still wore white, but no longer the rigid armor of a suit that made her look like a statue carved for display. Instead, she appeared in crisp white shirts, softer, freer, her hair falling loose when she allowed it. She still carried the weight of the company on her shoulders, but the hardness in her posture had shifted. When she came home, she no longer vanished into her office at once. She lingered, watching the children play, sometimes joining them on the floor, awkward at first, then laughing when Lily placed a wooden crown on her head. One evening, she gathered Noah into the study, the desk covered not with corporate contracts but with documents for something new. She told him she had spoken to the board not only of numbers and profits, but of legacy. She proposed the creation of the Grace Foundation, named for the sister she had lost but found again through Noah's presence. The foundation would fund programs for foster youth aging out of the system, for single parents who needed not pity but resources to stand on their feet. Evelyn's voice trembled when she described it, but not from weakness, from conviction. The board, surprisingly, had not resisted. Some things, she explained, didn't need to be profitable to be right. Noah listened, the name Grace reverberating in his chest like both a wound and a blessing. He saw in Evelyn's face the girl his wife had once described. The dreamer, the fighter, the one who refused to bend to a world determined to shape her. And he realized that Grace's laughter, though gone, had found a way to survive through her sister's resolve and his son's bright grin. Later that night, when the house was finally quiet, Noah sat with Evelyn on the staircase where he had first found the tin box. The children were asleep upstairs, their rooms filled with the soft glow of nightlights. He reached for her hand, and though hesitation flickered across her face, she didn't pull away. Their fingers entwined, and in the stillness, it felt less like two strangers clinging to comfort and more like a bridge being built, plank by plank, across the years of loneliness each had endured. "Do you remember what Grace wrote?" Noah asked quietly, his voice almost reverent in the dark. Evelyn turned her head, her brown eyes luminous in the faint spill of moonlight through the window. "That happiness isn't quiet," she said. Noah nodded, a smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "That it's loud." As if summoned, the silence shattered. Aiden and Lily came bounding down the hallway upstairs, dragging some contraption of pillows and broomsticks behind them, their giggles and shouts tumbling over one another like a chorus. The sound rolled down the staircase, filling the house, filling the spaces that had once been hollow with something vibrant and alive. The echoes of the mansion had changed, no longer the unsettling whispers of tampered wires or secret footsteps, but the joyous chaos of children making noise, of family daring to exist loudly in a place that had tried so hard to remain silent. Evelyn leaned against Noah's shoulder, her body finally allowing itself to rest. For the first time in years, the walls of the house did not feel like barriers or cages. They felt like shelter. Not perfect, not without scars, but strong enough to hold the laughter that now rattled them. Noah closed his eyes, breathing deeply. Not the acrid bite of smoke, not the metallic tang of tampered wires, just the clean, steady rhythm of a home alive. He tightened his hand gently around Evelyn's, and she returned the pressure. A job no one could keep had become a place he would never leave. A mansion that once expelled every soul who entered had opened itself to him, not through wealth or contracts, but through the loud, undeniable truth of love stitched together out of grief and second chances. And for the first time since Grace's death, Noah believed in something he thought he had buried with her: the possibility of a future. The house at last had found its voice. And it was loud, and it was human, and it was home. In my view, the ending of this story feels not just happy, but inevitable. Like all the loose threads scattered throughout the past finally found each other and wove themselves into a single tapestry. A tale that began as a cold thriller about a house full of secrets unexpectedly turned into a family drama about how loneliness is not defeated by success or money, but only by the people fate allows into your life at the most unexpected moment. What makes this especially valuable is that the character's happiness doesn't feel like a gift from the heavens. It's earned through loss, betrayal, smoke, and fear, through a confrontation with the past that cannot be forgotten. The house where no one ever stayed becomes a symbol. Once a reflection of Evelyn's emptiness and closed heart, it transforms into a place where children's laughter echoes, and even the walls themselves learn to trust. The shocking revelation that Noah is tied to both Grace and Evelyn does not destroy them, but instead gives them an anchor. Grace's memory becomes the foundation upon which a new future is built. The story closes not with the illusion of perfection, but with an honest acceptance of life in all its cracks and scars. And that's what makes the finale powerful. The characters remain human, not myths, and their happiness rings out loudly and vividly, just as Grace had promised in her letter.